Hello, my friend. The world of magic, filled with legends and ancient tales, is opening its gates once again. Tonight, in the Gryffindor dormitory by the crackling fireplace, I will share another story with my friends. Join us, for the magic is about to come alive.
The night had fallen thick and silent over Hogwarts Castle, its many towers gleaming faintly under the silver light of a swollen moon. The forbidden forest stretched beyond the grounds like a dark sea, vast and unknowable. Even the owls dared not fly above its canopy this night, for a strange tension had settled there, something wild and ancient stirring beneath the boughs. Inside his hut at the forest's edge, Rubeus Hagrid sat before a crackling fire, mending a broken crossbow string. Fang, his faithful boarhound, snored heavily beside him, the sound deep and steady. The smell of smoke and stew filled the air. It might have been a peaceful evening, but Hagrid's brow was furrowed. For 3 nights running, he'd heard it. The sound of hooves pounding through the forest, then a cry echoing through the trees. Centaurs, angry and restless. A heavy knock came at the door. "Come in, then," Hagrid grumbled, brushing off his hands. The door swung open, and to his surprise, it was not a student or a gamekeeper. It was Professor Dumbledore himself, wrapped in a midnight blue cloak, eyes shining like stars behind his half-moon spectacles. "Good evening, Hagrid," Dumbledore said quietly. "May I come in?" "Of course, Professor," Hagrid stammered, jumping up at once. "Didn't expect you down here this late." "I fear something grave is brewing in the forest," Dumbledore said, stepping inside. His gaze lingered on the fire for a moment. "The Centaurs have sent word. 2 factions have formed among them. A war may be coming." Hagrid's mouth fell open. "A war? Among the Centaurs? But they're proud folk, wise too." "Pride," Dumbledore said softly, "can cut deeper than steel. A star fell into the forest 3 nights ago. You heard it, I think?" Hagrid nodded slowly. "I thought it were just a meteor. Burned red when it fell." "Not a meteor," Dumbledore murmured. "Something older and far more dangerous. The Centaurs believe it to be a sign. Megorian, their leader, claims it foretells the rise of a power that will make their kind rulers of the earth once more. Firenze and his followers, however, believe it a curse, that the star brings only ruin." Dumbledore turned to him then, his face grave. "They will not listen to me, or to the Ministry. They will listen to you." "Me?" Hagrid blurted. "I don't know, Professor. They've never been fond of humans meddling in their affairs." "True," said Dumbledore, "but they respect you, Hagrid. They know your heart is loyal to the forest. I need you to go to them, find this fallen star, learn what it truly is, and prevent the fighting before it reaches our walls." Hagrid's chest swelled with a mixture of pride and dread. "I'll do it, sir," he said after a moment. "I'll find out what's what." "I know you will," Dumbledore said, his voice warm. "But be wary. Whatever fell from the heavens, it carries a darkness even I do not yet understand." When Dumbledore left, the night seemed heavier than before. The fire burned low, casting flickering shadows across the hut. Fang whimpered in his sleep as though sensing what was to come. Hagrid packed his lantern, his crossbow, and a pouch of roast beef sandwiches. He took his dragon hide coat from the peg, threw it about his shoulders, and stepped into the chill night air. The forest loomed before him, whispering with the voices of unseen things. Hagrid felt the familiar pull of it, a mix of fear and fondness. The forbidden forest had been his home since boyhood, filled with creatures he loved and dangers he had learned to respect. But tonight, it felt different. Alive. Watching. He stepped beneath the first great trees. The lantern light wavered across the mossy ground. An owl hooted far above, then fell silent. Somewhere deeper in the woods, a branch snapped, too heavy a sound for any fox or squirrel. Hagrid gripped his crossbow tighter. He walked for nearly an hour before the scent reached him. Smoke and ash, faint but sharp. He followed it through the undergrowth until he came upon a clearing he'd never seen before. The ground there was scorched black, and in its center lay a crater, wide and deep. At its heart glimmered a dull red stone, no bigger than a goblet, pulsing faintly as though it breathed. "Blimey," Hagrid whispered, stepping closer. The thing was warm even from a distance. The grass around it was dead, the air heavy with the scent of iron. "That ain't no star." Suddenly a voice rang out behind him. "Step away from it, half-giant." Hagrid spun around. Emerging from the shadows came 3 centaurs, tall, fierce, their bows drawn. Megorian stood at their head, his mane streaked with silver, his eyes burning like embers. "This is sacred ground," Megorian said, his voice low and dangerous. "You trespass upon the will of the stars." "I'm not looking for trouble," Hagrid said quickly, holding up his hands. "Professor Dumbledore sent me. He just wants to make sure no one gets hurt." "No one?" Megorian's lips curved into a grim smile. "It is far too late for that." At that moment, another figure stepped from the opposite side of the clearing. Firenze, golden-haired and calm-eyed, though his flanks bore scars from recent battle. He looked at Hagrid, then at Megorian. "This is not the way, Megorian," Firenze said. "Violence will not heal what is broken." "The stars speak of conquest," Megorian thundered, "and I will not ignore their call." Before Hagrid could speak, an arrow thudded into a tree beside him. The centaurs shouted, then vanished into the forest's shadows as swiftly as they'd appeared, leaving only the whisper of hooves fading into the distance. Hagrid knelt beside the glowing stone, his heart pounding. Whatever this thing was, it had driven the centaurs mad, and it was only the beginning. The morning came cold and gray, a mist creeping low across the forbidden forest like breath upon glass. Hagrid had not slept. He sat on a fallen log near the edge of the crater, Fang pressed close against his leg. The strange red stone still pulsed faintly at the center, glowing as though with a heartbeat of its own. No bird sang nearby, and even the trees seemed to hold their breath. Hagrid rose at last, rubbing a weary hand through his tangled hair. He had decided he would not leave that thing lying open in the forest. If it was dangerous, as Dumbledore feared, it needed to be taken somewhere safe. Yet even as he moved closer, the ground seemed to hum beneath his boots, a low vibration that stirred the air and prickled at his skin. "Steady, Fang," he muttered. "We'll take it back, careful-like." He drew a thick dragon-hide glove from his coat and reached toward the stone. The instant his fingers brushed its surface, pain shot through him, sharp, electric, alive. The red glow flared brighter, and in his mind came a whisper soft as wind, yet filled with fury. "Unbind us." Hagrid stumbled back with a cry, clutching his hand. The glow faded again, dimming to its slow pulse. He stared at it, breathing hard. "Right," he muttered shakily. "Not touching that again." Before he could think further, he heard a rustling in the trees. Dozens of shapes moved between the trunks. Sleek bodies, strong legs, bows and spears, glinting in the pale light. The centaurs were gathering again, but this time It was not Megorian's warband. Firenze led them. "Hagrid," Firenze called, stepping into the clearing, "you should not be here alone." "Well, I ain't exactly been welcomed," Hagrid replied, eyeing the forest around them. "Megorian nearly put an arrow through me last night." "He would do worse before this ends," Firenze said grimly. "The stars' coming has divided us. Some see prophecy, others see doom. Megorian believes the heavens have chosen him to lead the Centaurs to dominance over humankind. I have seen otherwise. I believe this stone is not of the heavens at all." Hagrid frowned. "I felt it speak, Firenze. Not like words, but like it were alive." Firenze's gaze hardened. "Then our fears are true. That stone is of dark wizardry, cast into the sky long ago by those who sought to trap its evil. The stars warned me of its return." "Then we've got to get it out of here," Hagrid said. "If Megorian gets hold of it." "He already hunts for it," Firenze interrupted. "His followers are spread throughout the forest. They will not stop until it is his. You must not try to move it. Touching it could bind you to it, body and soul." That made Hagrid stiffen. "Bind me? Like a curse?" "Worse," Firenze said. "It feeds on will and blood. It waits for one strong enough to claim it." A sudden whistle sliced through the air. Firenze leapt aside just as an arrow hissed past, burying itself in the earth. Then came the thunder of hooves. Megorian and his warriors burst into the clearing, their faces fierce, their weapons drawn. "Traitor," Megorian roared at Firenze. "You side with the humans against your own kind?" "I side with reason," Firenze answered, his voice calm even as the others raised their bows. "Enough!" Hagrid bellowed, stepping between them. "There's been too much fighting already. The forest belongs to everyone who lives in it, Centaur or not." But Megorian's eyes burned with something that chilled even Hagrid's brave heart. "You speak a peace while standing over the gift of the stars. Move aside, half-giant. The age of men is ending." Hagrid did not move. The moment hung. Then chaos erupted. Arrows flew, hooves pounded, and spells flashed through the mist as Hagrid raised his crossbow. Firenze's followers fought to defend the clearing, though they were outnumbered. Hagrid tried to shout sense into them, but his voice was lost beneath the roar. Then, amid the battle, the red stone pulsed violently. A wave of heat rolled outward, flattening grass and bending branches. The centaurs stumbled, eyes wide with fear. As the ground cracked, red light spilled from the crater like blood. "Back!" Hagrid shouted, pulling Firenze away as the glow surged higher, forming a twisting column of fire. Within it, a shape began to form. Vague, shadowed, like a figure struggling to emerge. Megorian's eyes widened. "The prophecy," he gasped. "It awakens." But Firenze looked stricken. "That is no prophecy. That is a prison breaking." With a deafening roar, the fire burst outward. The centaurs were thrown from their feet, their bows scattered. Hagrid shielded his face, his coat smoking with heat. When the light finally dimmed, the crater was empty, but a long scar of scorched earth led deeper into the forest. Whatever had been trapped in that stone had fled. Firenze rose shakily. "It is loose," he whispered, "a spirit of ancient magic, unchained by our folly." Megorian's face twisted with fury. "You have doomed us all, Firenze. You and this meddling oaf." He gestured at Hagrid. "When the creature returns, remember this. I offered to wield its power. You chose to fear it." "Megorian, wait!" Hagrid called, but the centaur was already gone, galloping into the depths of the forest with his warriors. Firenze turned to Hagrid, his expression grave. "It will seek power, warmth and life. If it finds the castle, Hagrid's blood ran cold. Then we'd better stop it before it gets anywhere near the students. He looked down at the empty crater still steaming. The scent of sulfur filled the air. Whatever that stone had held, it was no mere relic. It was something alive, something ancient. "Come on, Fang," Hagrid said, tightening his belt. "Looks like Dumbledore's right. This ain't just about the centaurs anymore." He and Firenze set off together through the tangled woods, following the trail of scorched earth. The trees grew darker as they went, the air thick with smoke. In the distance, faint echoes rose, a whispering, hollow and hungry, like voices carried by the wind. As the first rays of dawn filtered through the fog, Hagrid felt the weight of the forest pressing in. A shadow had woken in its heart, and if they did not stop it soon, the Centaur War would be the least of their worries. The sun rose dimly through the thick fog, its light weak against the canopy of ancient trees. The forbidden forest seemed changed since the night before, its silence heavier, its air colder. Birds no longer sang, and even the centaur's hooves, when they moved unseen through the mist, made no sound. Hagrid and Firenze pressed onward, following the blackened trail left by the fallen star's prisoner. The scorched path twisted like a serpent, cutting through roots and bramble, deeper and deeper into the forest's oldest reaches, places Hagrid himself had never dared to tread. Fang whimpered now and again, his tail low. Hagrid gave the dog's head a gentle pat. I don't like it either," he muttered. "But we've got to keep going. Can't let that thing get loose near the school." Firenze trotted silently beside him, bow slung across his back. His usually serene expression was tight with unease. "This part of the forest has not been walked by centaur or man in 100 years, he said quietly. "The spirits here remember ancient wars. It would not come this way without purpose." Hagrid frowned. "You reckon it's heading for something?" "Or someone," Firenze replied. "There are places where magic pools, drawn by old enchantments. Perhaps it seeks one of these." They came to a ridge where the trees parted and the ground fell away into a valley of gray stone. Here, the air smelled of damp moss and age. Massive roots coiled through the rock like the arms of sleeping giants. Hagrid squinted into the gloom and saw, glimmering faintly ahead, a ruined archway of white marble, half buried and cracked. "What's that, then?" he murmured. "The Shrine of Thalos," Firenze said, lowering his voice as if speaking in a temple. "Built long before Hogwarts stood. My people say it marks the resting place of an ancient guardian, one who bound the first wild magic that walked this land." Hagrid felt a chill. "You think that's what it's after?" Firenze nodded once. The fallen star was no stone. It was the prison of that same magic, broken free. If it seeks the shrine, it may be trying to reclaim what was once taken from it. They descended into the valley, moving carefully through the mist. The ground was slick beneath their boots. Hagrid could feel the hum of something deep below, a thrumming in the bones of the earth. The closer they came to the shrine, the stronger it grew. Suddenly, Fang growled, a low, trembling sound. Hagrid froze. Out of the mist came movement, tall figures stepping from behind the stones. Not centaurs this time, but shadows in armor, their eyes burning red. "Back, Hagrid!" Firenze cried, drawing his bow. "These are not living things." The shadows raised spears of pale flame and advanced soundlessly. Hagrid loosed a bolt from his crossbow and it tore through one, but the figure only wavered and reformed, whole again in an instant. "Blimey," Hagrid muttered, fumbling for his wand. "Confringo." The spell burst against the nearest wraith, scattering it into ash, but 3 more rose in its place. They surrounded him, moving like smoke, their whispers hissing in a language older than English. Firenze fired arrow after arrow, each glowing with starlight cutting through the mist. For a moment the air glittered with the shimmer of magic and the sound of old battle, but the spirits pressed closer, drawn to the heat of life. Then the earth itself trembled. From the ruined arch came a flare of red light, the same burning hue as the fallen stone. The shadows fell back, kneeling as one. A shape began to emerge through the light, vast and shifting, its form like molten glass and fire. It spoke with a voice that was not one, but many. "You broke my cage. The debt must be paid." Firenze raised his bow. "What are you?" The voice seemed to echo through their skulls. "Once I was Thalos, the Binder, the Guardian, but the wizards used my power and sealed me away. Now I take back what was mine." Hagrid stepped forward, heart pounding. "We didn't mean to set ye loose," he said. "If ye let us, we'll find a way to—" The thing's eyes flared crimson. "There is no peace, only reclamation." It raised a hand and the ground erupted. Roots tore from the soil, wrapping around the marble pillars and splitting them apart. The wraiths swarmed forward once more, their spears aimed at Firenze. "Hagrid, go!" Firenze shouted. "You must warn Dumbledore." "Not leaving you here," Hagrid roared back. He swung his crossbow like a club, smashing through the nearest spirit. The creature burst into sparks, but another lunged at Firenze, striking his flank. The centaur stumbled, blood dark against his golden coat. The sight filled Hagrid with a surge of anger. "That's enough," he bellowed. He grabbed one of the fallen pillars, half his height and twice his weight, and hurled it with all his might. It smashed through the archway, collapsing the upper stones. The shrine shuddered as debris fell, cutting off the red light. The spirits let out a single echoing wail and vanished into the fog. The valley fell still. Panting, Hagrid ran to Firenze's side. "You all right?" Firenze grimaced, pressing a hand to the wound. "It is nothing. But the creature, it is free now. Destroying the shrine only delayed it. It will gather strength." Hagrid's jaw tightened. "Then we'll find it before it does." He tore a strip from his cloak and bound Firenze's wound. "We'll get you back to the edge of the forest. You can warn the others." Firenze caught his arm. "No, Hagrid, my people will not listen to me now. They believe Megorian's word. You must go to Dumbledore. Tell him what we've seen." Hagrid hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But you rest here till you're fit. I'll come back for you." Firenze's eyes gleamed faintly with pain and trust. "Go, Keeper of Beasts. The forest will need your courage before the end." Hagrid took Fang's collar and started back through the mist. Behind him the shrine lay in ruin, its marble cracked and dark. But far above, in the upper reaches of the forest, a new light flickered, red and shifting, moving toward the castle, and in the distance, faint but rising, came the sound of horns. Centaur horns. The Centaur War had begun. By the time Hagrid reached the forest's outer glades, dawn had burned away the mist, but the air was no less heavy. A deep unease hung over every rustle, every whisper of branch and leaf. The forbidden forest, once so alive with quiet secrets, now felt like a great creature holding its breath. Hagrid's strides were long and determined, Fang trotting close at his heel. His thoughts spun like storm clouds. He had seen much in his years, dragons in chains, giants at war, creatures darker than nightmares. But this was different. The thing from the star, the voice that had spoken through flame, was not simply a monster. It was something old, older than Hogwarts, older than the forest itself, and it was free. He had to reach Dumbledore before it found its way to the castle. But as he neared the forest's edge, the wind carried another sound. The ring of hooves, the low rumble of voices. He slowed, crouching behind a tangle of ferns. Ahead, in a clearing of silvered grass, two groups of centaurs faced each other in a tense half-circle. Magorian's warriors on one side, Firenze's wounded followers on the other. At the center stood Magorian himself, tall and fierce, his dark mane bound with strips of iron. His eyes glowed with the same red light that had burned in the heart of the fallen stone. "You have all seen the signs," Magorian thundered, his voice echoing through the trees. "The forest burns, the skies bleed fire, and the stars themselves have opened a path. The age of man ends tonight." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some centaurs nodded in grim agreement, but many looked uneasy. Firenze, pale and limping from his wound, stood among them. "You're being deceived," he called. "The light that fell from the heavens was no gift. It was a curse. If you follow it, you will lead our kind to ruin." Magorian laughed, a terrible sound. "Ruin? Or glory? The magic that once bound the world belongs to us. The stars chose me to reclaim it." Hagrid stepped out from the ferns, his crossbow raised. "That's enough," he bellowed. "There's no glory in this. You're being tricked, all of you." Every bow turned toward him at once. Fang growled low. "Hagrid," Firenze said quickly, "leave this place." But Hagrid stood firm. "Listen to me, all of you. That thing in the woods, Thalos it called itself, it ain't no savior. It's destroying everything it touches. You think it'll stop once it's done with the humans? It'll take the forest too." For a heartbeat, the clearing was silent. Then Magorian sneered. "You expect us to believe a servant of wizards? The half-giant who chains dragons and pets werewolves? You think we have not seen what your kind do to creatures of magic? That's not fair," Hagrid said, his voice rough with anger. "I've spent my whole life protecting what lives here, but this isn't something you can reason with." Magorian's hand went to the hilt of a curved blade at his side. "You speak of reason as if you know the stars will, but I have seen it written in fire. The age of our obedience is over." He lifted his sword high. "Centaurs, ride with me." A thunder of hooves followed as half the centaurs charged into the forest, their weapons gleaming. Firenze tried to stop them, calling after Magorian, but his words were lost beneath the stampede. Within moments, only silence remained, and a trail of crushed grass leading deeper into the woods. Hagrid hurried to Firenze's side. "Where are they going?" "To war," Firenze said grimly. "Magorian will strike first at the forest's guardians, the werewolves, the acromantulas, anything that stands in his path. He believes their defeat will prove his strength to Thalos." Hagrid clenched his fists. "Then that creature's already got hold of him." Firenze nodded. "It speaks through him now. You can see it in his eyes." Hagrid looked toward the east, where the sun was climbing pale and cold over the castle's distant towers. "We've got to stop this before the Ministry catches wind. They'll come marching in with fire and curses, and the forest'll never recover." "The Ministry will come regardless," said Firenze. They fear what they do not understand. But you still have a chance to reach Dumbledore. He must be warned that the power of Thalos has taken form. Hagrid hesitated, glancing back toward the direction Megorian had gone. And leave you to face him alone? Firenze's gaze was steady. I will gather what few still listen to reason. Go, Hagrid, this war may soon reach beyond the trees. Reluctantly, Hagrid nodded. All right. But hold fast, Firenze, you're not fighting this alone. He turned and began the long trek out of the forest. The shadows between the trunks seemed thicker now, full of whispers and flickering lights. Once he caught a glimpse of movement, great spiders retreating deeper underground, their eyes glinting like lanterns. The creatures could feel it too. The forest was turning against itself. When at last he broke free from the tree line, the air outside felt thin and cold. The castle stood ahead, grand and still, its windows glinting with morning light. For a fleeting moment he almost believed the world beyond the forest remained untouched. But as he trudged up the slope toward his hut, a sudden gust of wind swept over the grounds, hot, unnatural. The smell of burning wood filled the air. Hagrid turned. Behind him, the edge of the forbidden forest glowed faintly red. A column of fire rose among the trees, twisting skyward like a serpent. From within, it came the faint sound of voices, hundreds of them crying out in fury. He broke into a run. Bursting into his hut, he seized a handful of flue powder from the jar above the hearth, threw it into the flames, and shouted, "Headmaster's office." The world spun green and fast. A moment later, he stumbled out of Dumbledore's fireplace, coughing on ash. Dumbledore was already waiting. "You've seen it then," he said quietly. "Aye," Hagrid wheezed. "The Centaurs are fighting each other, and Megorian, he's possessed, Professor. That thing from the stone, it's using him." Dumbledore's expression darkened. "Then Thalos has chosen its vessel." He moved to the window, his eyes fixed on the dark smoke rising beyond the forest. "It feeds on conflict, on fear. By setting creature against creature, it gathers the strength it lost in its long prison." "What can we do?" Hagrid asked. Dumbledore turned back to him, his gaze sharp and bright. "You must return to the forest, Hagrid. Find Megorian before Thalos fully claims him. There may still be a chance to separate them." Hagrid swallowed. "And if I can't?" "Then you must end it," said Dumbledore softly, "before the forest burns and the fire spreads to Hogwarts itself." For a long moment neither spoke. Then Hagrid nodded, heavy-hearted. "I'll go. But I'll not kill him if I can help it. Megorian's not evil, he's just lost." Dumbledore's eyes softened. "That is why I trust you above all others." Hagrid turned to leave, his great frame filling the doorway. Outside, the wind carried the faint echo of hooves and war cries. The Centaur War had begun in earnest, and somewhere in its heart, Thalos watched and waited, growing stronger with every drop of blood spilled. As Hagrid vanished once more into the forest's shadow, Dumbledore whispered to the empty room, "Let mercy guide you, my friend, for none of us may escape what the stars have foretold." By nightfall, the forbidden forest was ablaze with unrest. Not yet fire, but something close to it. A fever in the roots, a restless shudder in the wind. The cries of creatures echoed across the dark, blending with the distant thunder of hooves. The Centaur War had spread like a curse through every glade and hollow. Hagrid moved quickly beneath the towering oaks, his lantern swinging in one hand, his crossbow in the other. Fang padded beside him, hackles raised. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of scorched leaves. Somewhere to the north a horn sounded, a long, mournful note that trembled through the ground. He was not alone in the forest that night. As he passed beneath a curtain of vines, something small and silver darted across his path. A unicorn foal, pale as snow, its flanks streaked with blood. It stumbled, frightened, then vanished into the mist. Hagrid's heart clenched. He knew what it meant. Blood was being spilled, and not only by centaurs. He found signs of battle everywhere. Arrows embedded in trees, hoofprints scattered among deep claw marks. A shattered bow lay half buried in the dirt, still humming faintly with magic. Every sound seemed to carry danger. At last, as he crested a small rise, he saw them, Magorian's war band, spread across a clearing lit by firelight. The centaurs stood around a massive stone altar, the ancient kind that dotted the forest in its oldest parts. Upon it burned a flame of unnatural red, and before it stood Magorian himself, his mane matted, his eyes blazing with the same color as the fire. Behind him, bound in iron chains and guarded by two centaurs, knelt a figure Hagrid recognized at once. Bane, proud and scarred, once Magorian's closest rival. Magorian's voice rang across the clearing, deep and cold. The stars have spoken. The weak will bow, and the strong will rise. The fire of Thalos purges all that resists. Bane lifted his head, defiant despite the chains. You speak not for the stars, Magorian. You speak for the darkness that devours them. Magorian raised his hand, and the flame on the altar flared higher. Bane flinched, his face twisting in pain as sparks danced along his bonds. Hagrid stepped forward, his voice booming. "That's enough!" Every centaur turned. The fire crackled louder, as if sensing him. Magorian's red gaze met his. "The servant returns," he said softly. "Tell me, half-giant, have you come to kneel or to burn?" "I've come to stop this madness," Hagrid said, leveling his crossbow. "This ain't you talking, Magorian. It's that thing inside you. You've got to fight it." The centaurs around him shifted uneasily. Some looked uncertain, others snarled in rage. The forest wind swirled, carrying embers through the clearing. "Fight it?" Magorian's voice was almost tender. "I am not possessed, Hagrid. I am chosen. Thalos showed me the truth. The world of men and wizards has poisoned the old ways. We will take back what was ours before your kind built castles and cages." "You're wrong," Hagrid growled. "That thing ain't showing you truth. It's using you. It'll burn everything, and you with it." "Then let it burn," Magorian said simply. He turned toward the altar, spreading his arms. The fire surged higher, twisting into the shape of a serpent. The heat forced Hagrid to raise his arm to shield his face. Fang barked wildly, backing away. Magorian began to chant in the old tongue of the centaurs, words Hagrid did not understand but felt deep in his bones. The ground trembled. The flames stretched upward, reaching into the night sky. Above them, the stars flickered and dimmed. From the shadows, a new voice spoke, hoarse and desperate. "Magorian, stop!" Firenze limped into the clearing, a bandage still around his flank. His bow hung uselessly at his side, but his presence alone drew every eye. Magorian sneered. "You dare show your face again, traitor?" "I dare speak the truth," Firenze said, his voice steady. "You are not leading our people. You are destroying them. Look around you. The forest we swore to protect burns because of you." Magorian hesitated only for a heartbeat. Then he thrust his hand toward the flame. "The fire will cleanse the forest of weakness." The serpent of flame struck. Firenze dived aside, but the edge of the blast caught him, hurling him to the ground. Hagrid roared in fury and charged. Enough! He swung the butt of his crossbow like a club, striking Megorian hard across the shoulder. The centaur staggered, and for a moment the red light in his eyes flickered. Hagrid, Firenze gasped, struggling to rise. The altar! It's the conduit! Understanding hit Hagrid like a bolt. He turned toward the burning stone. With a bellow, he tore a fallen tree branch from the ground, thick as his arm, and swung it down upon the altar. Stone cracked. The fire screamed, a sound like tearing metal, and burst apart. A shock wave rippled through the clearing, knocking centaurs from their feet. The red light vanished, leaving only the pale flicker of torches. When Hagrid looked back, Megorian was on his knees, clutching his head, gasping as if drowning. Hagrid. Megorian's voice was broken, uncertain. What have I done? Before Hagrid could answer, the ground split open where the altar had stood. A geyser of crimson light shot upward, blinding them all. From its heart rose a shadow, tall, winged, and formless, eyes burning like coals. You break my vessels, it hissed, but I am not bound by flesh. I am hunger. I am fire. It swept over the clearing like a storm, and the centaurs scattered in panic. Trees burst into flame wherever the shadow passed. Hagrid felt the heat sear his skin even through his coat. Firenze, he shouted. I see it. Firenze cried, drawing a silver arrow from his quiver. He loosed it into the heart of the shadow. The arrow vanished within, swallowed whole. The thing laughed, a deep, echoing sound that shook the forest. You think your light can wound me? You are the dust of ages long forgotten. Hagrid grabbed Firenze by the arm. We can't fight it here. Come on. Together they ran, dodging falling branches and fleeing centaurs. Behind them the shadow rose higher, spreading its wings of flame. From every corner of the forest came the cries of beasts and birds as the fire reached outward, devouring everything in its path. At last they stumbled into a narrow ravine, the heat roaring behind them. Hagrid turned back, chest heaving, and saw the impossible. Through the smoke, the form of Thalos taking shape, now fully apart from Megorian, a creature of living fire, its body made of the same burning stars that had once sealed it away. It threw back its head and screamed, a sound that tore through the night, and as it rose above the trees, its eyes fixed on the distant towers of Hogwarts. Firenze clutched Hagrid's arm. It is not content with the forest, he said. It means to claim the castle next. Hagrid felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He looked up at the fiery shape, then down at the darkened forest beneath it. No, he said, voice low but fierce. Not while I've got breath in me. And as the first sparks of Thalos's fire drifted toward the castle's ancient walls, Hagrid tightened his grip on his crossbow and started toward the rising flames once more. The night wind howled through the burning treetops, carrying with it the roar of something vast and terrible. Hagrid ran through the smoke-choked woods, his coat torn, his face blackened with soot. Behind him the forest blazed, a sea of crimson and gold, every tree a torch. Ahead, faint through the smoke, rose the high cliffs where the castle loomed, its towers glimmering like watchful eyes. Beside him galloped Firenze, limping but unbroken, his silver hair streaked with ash. It draws strength from the fire, he shouted over the din. The forest itself feeds it. Hagrid coughed hard, waving away the smoke. Then we'll cut it off somehow. We've got to get it away from Hogwarts. But the creature, Thalos, was already on the move. Its vast, flaming wings unfurled across the treetops, sending sparks spiraling toward the heavens. Each beat of those wings rained fire across the land, burning paths of destruction through the forbidden forest. The cries of centaurs and beasts echoed in the distance. "Professor Dumbledore will see the flames," Firenze gasped. "He will come." "Aye," Hagrid said grimly, "but I reckon he'll need more than his wand this time." They reached a ridge where the forest fell away into open ground. There, beneath a spreading oak that miraculously had not yet burned, they paused. Hagrid stared back at the inferno and felt his heart twist. The forest he loved, the place that had been his home for half a lifetime, was dying. "Easy now, Fang," he murmured, kneeling to calm the trembling dog. "We'll fix this, somehow." A sudden sound broke through the crackle of fire, hooves pounding hard against the earth. From the smoke emerged a band of centaurs, not Magorian's warriors this time, but the remnants of Firenze's kin. Their faces were grim and blackened, their eyes hard with determination. "Keeper of beasts," one said, "our herds are scattered. The young are fleeing toward the river. Magorian lies wounded, but the spirit has left him." Hagrid stood, hope flickering. "He's alive then?" "Barely," said the centaur. "But his mind is his own again." Firenze stepped forward. "We cannot abandon him. He knows the old runes, the wards laid by our ancestors. They may be the only thing that can bind Thalos again." Hagrid nodded. "Then let's get to him, quick as we can." They moved through the smoke together, following the centaur's lead. The ground was hot beneath their feet, and the air shimmered with heat. Strange shapes moved through the flames, shadows that were not men nor beasts, but something in between. Thalos's power had awakened the forest's oldest spirits, and now they wandered, howling and lost. When they reached the clearing where the altar had stood, they found Magorian lying among the ruins. His once proud mane was singed, his armor melted to his skin in places, yet his eyes were clear again, the fever gone. "Hagrid," he rasped, "you were right. The stars did not send it. It came from beneath." Hagrid knelt beside him. "Don't try to talk, Magorian. We'll get you out of here." But Magorian grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "No. Listen. The wards of the forest, the stones marked with the runes of Thalos's binding, they still stand, though buried. If we can awaken them, they will draw the spirit back into the earth." Firenze's eyes narrowed. "You mean to imprison it again?" "It is the only way," Magorian said, "but it will need power, life, blood, and will, a sacrifice." Hagrid's stomach turned. "There's gotta be another way." "There isn't," Magorian said quietly. "The wards feed on what they protect. The guardian must give himself willingly." Before Hagrid could answer, a low rumble shook the ground. The air shimmered, and the forest parted as if by an unseen hand. Through the smoke and flame came Thalos itself, no longer a shadow, but a towering being of molten light, its face like a mask of burning stone. "You cannot bind what was born from fire," it said, its voice like the cracking of mountains. "You are ash, and I am the wind that scatters you." The centaurs raised their bows, but Hagrid shouted, "No! Run! Get the others to safety!" He turned to Magorian. "Where are these wards?" Magorian pointed weakly toward the north. "Beyond the Black Mere, where the river bends, there lies the stone of binding. Place your hand upon it and speak my name. The runes will answer." The ground shook again, closer now. Thalos advanced, its flames devouring the air. Hagrid hoisted Magorian over his shoulder, ignoring the centaur's protests. "Hang on. We're getting you there." Ferenzi took the lead, galloping through the burning trees, clearing a path where he could. The smoke stung Hagrid's eyes, but he pressed on, coughing, stumbling, half-blind. Behind them Thalos followed, its roar rolling like thunder. Each time its foot struck the ground, the earth split open in rivers of molten red. They reached the river at last, a dark, sluggish stream, reflecting the fire above. On its far side rose a mound of stone, half buried in roots. Strange markings glowed faintly along its surface, the ancient runes of the Centaurs. "That's it!" Hagrid shouted. He waded through the shallows, water hissing around his boots. Ferenzi and the others covered him with arrows of starlight, though each vanished before reaching their target. Hagrid laid Megorian gently upon the stone. "Say the words, lad," he urged. Megorian smiled faintly, his voice a whisper. "You must say them, Hagrid. You carry the strength of both our worlds." Before Hagrid could protest, Megorian pressed his blood-stained hand to the stone. Light flared beneath his palm, the runes blazing bright. From the burning forest came a scream. Thalos had reached the river's edge. Hagrid raised his voice, shouting the words. Megorian murmured. The light from the stone surged outward, racing across the water, through the trees, up the trunks of every living thing. The earth trembled as the old magic woke. Thalos roared in fury. It lashed out with one burning hand, sending a wave of fire toward them. Hagrid threw himself over Megorian, bracing for the end, but the fire struck the glowing runes and broke apart, scattering into harmless sparks. The air filled with a deep, thrumming hum as the runes circled Thalos like a cage of light. The creature's form flickered, struggling against the pull. "You cannot bind me," it screamed. "The stars are my home. The earth is my tomb." "Then back to your tomb ye go," Hagrid bellowed, pouring every ounce of strength he had into the final words of the spell. The light burst outward, blinding white. The roar of Thalos became a cry, then a whisper, then silence. When Hagrid opened his eyes again, the fire was gone. The trees were blackened, the air heavy with ash, but the forest still stood. Megorian lay still upon the stone, his chest unmoving. Ferenzi bowed his head. "He gave his life for the forest," he said softly. Hagrid rose slowly, exhaustion dragging at his limbs. "Aye," he murmured, "and I'll not forget it." Above them the sky cleared. The stars shone once more, cold, bright, and distant. But in their silent shimmer, Hagrid thought he saw one flicker red just for an instant before fading back into the night. He turned toward the castle where faint lights glimmered in the windows. The battle was over, but the cost would be remembered for generations. "Come on, Fang," he whispered, voice thick with smoke and sorrow. "Let's go home." And as he walked beneath the wounded trees, the wind carried a single, distant whisper through the branches, a voice both fierce and gentle, the echo of Megorian's vow. "The forest endures." The dawn that followed was like none the castle had ever seen. A gray light spread across the smoldering hills, where smoke still rose from the edges of the forbidden forest. The air smelled of wet ash and iron, and even the wind seemed to move with caution, whispering through the blackened boughs as though afraid to wake the dead. Hagrid stood at the edge of the grounds, his boots sunk deep in mud, his face streaked with soot and grief. The forest, his forest, had survived, though barely. Trees lay fallen like slain giants, their roots steaming, their leaves turned to embers. In the distance, the Centaur's horns no longer called to war, but to mourning. The war had burned itself out, leaving silence in its wake. Fang pressed against Hagrid's knee, whining softly. Hagrid rested a hand on the dog's head, but said nothing. His throat was thick, his heart heavy. Behind him came the faint creak of the castle gates. "Rubeus," said a calm, measured voice. He turned. Professor Dumbledore approached across the slope, his long robes brushing the damp grass. The headmaster's eyes, clear and sharp despite the smoke, swept over the ruined forest before resting on Hagrid. "I feared as much," Dumbledore murmured. "The forest still stands. But the price?" Hagrid nodded mutely. "Megorian's gone, sir. Gave himself up to seal the wards. Firenze and the others held the line till the end." Dumbledore's face softened with sorrow. He was proud, but noble to the last. He looked to the horizon where faint red sparks still glimmered in the ashes. "Thalos's fire will not fade quickly. The earth will remember." Hagrid frowned. "You mean it could come back?" "The wards will hold for a time," said Dumbledore. "But such things never vanish entirely. Darkness changes shape. It waits." Hagrid stared at the forest, jaw tight. "Then we'll be ready for it. Me and the creatures, every one of us." A flicker of pride touched Dumbledore's expression. "I know you will, and perhaps one day the forest will forgive what was done to it." They stood in silence for a while, the wind carrying faint sounds, the distant murmur of centaurs tending to their wounded, the creak of trees settling after fire. The forbidden forest, though wounded, lived on. At last Dumbledore spoke again. "Come, my friend. You have done more than any could ask. Rest for now." But Hagrid shook his head. "Can't yet, Professor. The beasts'll be frightened. Unicorns'll need tendon, and the acromantulas'll be in a rage. If I don't see to 'em, no one will." Dumbledore smiled faintly, the kind of smile that held both pride and deep weariness. "You never change, Rubeus." "Very well, but do take care. The forest will be uneasy for many nights." With that, the headmaster turned and walked back toward the castle, his cloak rippling in the wind. Hagrid watched him go, then turned back toward the smoking trees. "Come on, Fang," he said softly. "Let's see who's left to help." They entered the forest once more, stepping over roots and fallen branches. The deeper they went, the darker it grew. Steam rose from the scorched ground, and the faint sound of running water trickled somewhere nearby. In a clearing, Hagrid found a group of centaurs gathered around a stone circle, Firenze among them. His golden coat was marred by soot, but his eyes were bright and steady. "Hagrid," he said as the half-giant approached. "It is done, then?" "Aye," Hagrid said, kneeling beside the centaurs. "Megorian's gone, but he saved us all." Firenze bowed his head. "His name will be sung among my people. For generations they will speak of the night he stood against the fire." One of the younger centaurs, a mare with silver hair, stepped forward hesitantly. "And the forest?" she asked. "Will it heal?" "It will," Hagrid said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. "Might take years, maybe longer, but life finds its way back. Always does." Firenze looked toward the charred treetops. "Perhaps that is the lesson of this night. Even the stars fall, yet they rise again in the heavens." They worked together through the day, tending to the wounded creatures, patching burns on unicorns, freeing trapped bowtruckles, calming terrified thestrals. By evening, the forest was quieter. Smoke still curled from the ground, but beneath it, new sounds returned. The trickle of streams, the soft hum of insects, the sigh of leaves that had somehow survived. When at last the sun set, Hagrid built a small fire in the clearing, not of magic, but of ordinary wood. The centaurs gathered around it. For the first time since the war began, their voices rose not in anger, but in remembrance. Firenze spoke a prayer in the old tongue, his words low and rhythmic, echoing through the ruined trees. Hagrid listened in silence. When the prayer ended, he tossed a handful of wildflowers into the flames. "For Magorian," he said softly, "and for all the beasts who didn't make it through." The fire crackled, sending sparks into the darkening sky. Firenze touched his hand to his chest in salute. "The forest endures," he said, repeating Magorian's final words. Hagrid nodded, eyes glistening. "Aye, it does." The night deepened, and one by one the centaurs departed, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. At last only Hagrid and Fang remained beside the dying fire. The stars shone bright overhead, clear and calm once more. For a while Hagrid simply sat, staring into the embers. His thoughts wandered to Dumbledore, to the students who would wake tomorrow, never knowing how close their world had come to ruin, to Magorian, whose sacrifice had saved them all. He sighed heavily, rubbing a hand over his face. "Well, Fang," he muttered, "reckon we've seen worse nights. Still, wouldn't mind a bit of quiet for a while." Fang gave a low, approving groan and lay his head on Hagrid's boot. When Hagrid finally rose to his feet, the fire had burned low to glowing coals. He kicked dirt over it, slung his crossbow over his shoulder, and started back toward his hut. The forest whispered around him, not with fear, but with something gentler, like gratitude. As he passed beneath the tall oaks, a faint light caught his eye. There, half buried in the roots, lay a shard of red crystal, the last remnant of the fallen star. It glimmered softly, harmless now, its power spent. Hagrid crouched, studying it for a long moment. Then he scooped it up and slipped it into his coat pocket. "Best not leave you lying about," he said. "We've had enough trouble from your kind." When he finally reached the edge of the forest, dawn was breaking again. The sky was streaked with rose and gold, and the first light touched the castle towers. In soft brilliance, the fires were gone. The smoke had thinned. The world felt, at least for now, at peace. Hagrid paused at the threshold, glancing back one last time at the forest he'd fought to save. "Rest easy, old girl," he whispered. "You've earned it." Then he turned and trudged toward his hut, Fang close at his heel. The wind carried the faintest sound behind him, a rustle like laughter, like the whisper of leaves reborn. The forest endured indeed, and so did he. And though he could not see it, far beneath the roots and soil, the red light of the sealed Thalos pulsed once, slowly, faintly, like the heartbeat of a sleeping giant, waiting for the world to forget. Winter crept slowly over the grounds of Hogwarts, and for a time the memory of fire faded into the hush of snow. The forest healed in silence. Blackened trunks gave rise to thin green shoots, and beneath the frost, new life stirred. The centaurs kept to their deep glades, mourning in their own way, and the creatures of the wood grew calm again. To most at the castle, the flames of that dreadful night were but a story now, half believed and quickly forgotten. But Hagrid did not forget. He rose earlier than before, often before dawn, trudging into the woods with his lantern swinging and Fang plodding faithfully beside him. He would check on the thestral herds, rebuild the dens of the Neasels, and feed the herd of unicorns that had taken to gathering near the Blackmere. It seemed to him that every living thing in the forest had been marked by that terrible fire. Some bore scars, others a lingering fear, and though the trees whispered in peace again, he could not shake the feeling that something still stirred beneath the soil. Each night, as he sat by his hearth, Hagrid would take the shard of red crystal from the small iron box where he kept it and study it under the firelight. The shard no longer glowed. It looked like glass, harmless and dull. Yet sometimes, only sometimes, it seemed to hum faintly, a vibration so soft he could almost believe he imagined it. He told Dumbledore once when the headmaster came to share tea in his hut. The older wizard listened quietly as the fire popped and Fang snored by their feet. "It's quiet, Professor," Hagrid said, "but I can't help thinking it's waiting for something. Feels wrong, locking it up like a trinket." Dumbledore's gaze rested on the box. "Magic, especially that which is old and untamed, rarely sleeps forever," he said. "But this," he laid a gentle hand atop the box, "is better here, under the care of one who knows compassion, than in any vault or ministry chest. It will not wake unless called." "Called?" Hagrid frowned. "You mean someone could use it?" Dumbledore's eyes, bright and far-seeing, flicked toward the frost-covered window. "If one were foolish enough to listen to the whispers of power, yes. But I trust you, Hagrid. Keep it safe, and remember, the forest chose you to guard its secrets. That is no small thing." The words settled heavily in Hagrid's heart. He nodded, though uneasily. Weeks passed, and winter deepened. Then, one bitter night, as the moon hung sharp above the castle, a strange wind swept down from the mountains. It carried no warmth, yet it stirred the ashes buried deep within the forest floor. The centaurs felt it first. Their horns sounded softly in the distance, notes of warning. Hagrid woke with a start. Fang whimpered beside the hearth. The iron box upon the table trembled faintly. He rose at once, snatching up his coat and wand. The wind outside was fierce, rattling the shutters. "Stay here, Fang," he murmured, though the dog whined and pressed close to his knee. "All right then, but keep quiet." When he stepped outside, the air hit him like a blow, cold, sharp, alive. The forest loomed dark against the snow, but above it, strange lights flickered between the trees, red and silver, shifting like reflections in water. He followed them down the path, his boots crunching through the frost. The lights moved deeper into the forest, beckoning. The further he went, the clearer a low sound became, a hum, deep and rhythmic like a heartbeat. At last he reached the Black Mere, frozen over in a sheet of dull ice, the moon reflected in its center like a white coin, and around it the snow lay undisturbed except for one thing, a single mark carved in the ice, the shape of a spiral. He crouched beside it, frowning. The lines were fresh, not the work of any beast. Then the hum grew louder. From beneath the ice something pulsed, a faint red glow rising slowly, then fading again. "Oh no," Hagrid breathed. "Not again." He drew his wand and tapped the ice. "Finite incantatum." The glow flickered, dimmed, then burst upward with blinding light. The ice shattered, and Hagrid fell backward into the snow as a wave of heat rolled out. From the broken lake rose a column of flame, narrow at first, then widening into a ring. Inside that ring stood a figure. It was not Thalos nor any beast he knew. The figure was human, or nearly so, tall and robed, its face hidden beneath a hood of crimson fire. In its hands, it held a staff of dark metal, tipped with a crystal identical to the shard in Hagrid's hut. Hagrid scrambled to his feet, heart hammering. "Who are ye?" The figure tilted its head. "A servant of the old flame," it said, its voice like embers crackling. "You woke the forest. I only came to claim what was promised." "I don't know what you're after," Hagrid said, "but you've no business here. The forest's had enough of your kind." The figure stepped forward, and where its feet touched the snow, frost hissed into steam. "Thalos was merely the beginning. His fire was a fragment of the first light, scattered by fools. I seek to restore it." Hagrid's hand went to his crossbow. "You won't find what you're looking for here." The hooded head turned, and though he could not see its face, Hagrid felt its gaze like heat against his skin. "Then you keep it." The air thickened. Behind the figure, the flames twisted into shapes, faces, claws, wings, all burning, all whispering. "Give me the shard, Keeper," the voice said softly, "or the forest will burn anew." Before Hagrid could answer, a sudden blast of light burst from the trees. The intruder staggered, its fire dimming as a dozen centaurs galloped into the clearing, bows drawn, arrows glowing with starlight. Firenze led them, his mane frosted white, his eyes fierce. "Back to your shadow, spirit," Firenze commanded. "This forest remembers its guardian." The figure hissed, its form flickering like a dying flame. "Then remember this: fire always returns." With a sound like wind through ashes, it vanished, leaving only the smell of smoke and the broken ice at Hagrid's feet. For a long moment no one spoke. The centaurs lowered their bows, the night settling once more around them. Firenze stepped forward. "It begins again," he said grimly. "Something stirs in the old magic. That was no ghost, it was a messenger." Hagrid rubbed his arm, still feeling the heat. "Aye, and it knew about the shard. Somehow it knew." Firenze nodded slowly. "Then the shard is no longer safe here." Hagrid looked toward the castle in the distance, its windows glowing faintly through the falling snow. "No," he said softly. "It's not." He stared down into the dark water of the Black Mere, where the reflection of the moon shivered beside the red glow still flickering faintly beneath the surface. The forest was quiet again, but its peace felt thinner now, fragile like glass before the hammer's fall. Firenze met his gaze. "Whatever has awakened Hagrid, it will not rest until the flame is whole again." Hagrid squared his shoulders. "Then we'll be ready for it." He turned toward the path. "I'll take the shard to Dumbledore. Best we keep it where even fire can't reach." And as the first snow began to fall heavier, covering the shattered ice, the centaurs raised their faces to the stars. None spoke, for they all felt the same truth. In the chill air, the war had ended, but the story was not done. In the depths beneath the forest, far below the roots and stones, something stirred in answer, a soft, echoing thrum, like a heartbeat, waking after a long sleep. The flame had not died, it had merely been waiting. The storm broke over Hogwarts with a fury unseen in living memory. Winds howled down from the mountains, bending the treetops of the forbidden forest until they bowed like penitent giants. Snow fell not in soft flakes, but in sheets of white fire, driven sideways by the gale. It was as though the sky itself sought to cleanse the world below. Hagrid fought against it, trudging through the drifts that reached his knees. His coat was soaked through, his beard rimed with frost. In his arms he cradled the iron box wrapped in a heavy cloth. Inside the shard pulsed faintly, its glow dim but insistent, like a heart that refused to die. He had not waited for morning. After the figure's appearance at the Black Mere, he knew delay meant danger. The shard had to be hidden where no shadow could reach it. Fang barked once, his cry lost in the wind. "Easy, boy," Hagrid shouted, though his voice was nearly swallowed by the storm. "We're nearly there." The castle loomed ahead, its towers blurred by snow, its lights flickering dimly. The great oak doors creaked open as he approached, spilling a wash of golden light onto the steps. Inside waited Dumbledore. He stood calm despite the tempest, his long cloak dusted with frost. His eyes flicked at once to the cloth bundle in Hagrid's arms. "You have it?" he said. "Aye." Hagrid shut the doors behind him, leaning against them to catch his breath. "There was someone in the forest, Professor. Said they were a servant of the old flame. Tried to take it." Dumbledore's face grew grave. "Describe them? Tall, hooded, like fire took the shape of a man. Spoke of Thalos and something older. Called it the First Light." The headmaster's eyes darkened as though a shadow passed behind them. "The First Flame. I had hoped never to hear that name again." Hagrid frowned. "You know what it means?" Dumbledore nodded slowly. "It is one of the oldest legends in wizard kind. Perhaps older than the word wizard itself. The story tells of the first spark of magic, the fire that gave life to all enchantment in this world. But when pride and greed grew among the early spellcasters, the flame was divided, scattered into fragments to prevent its power from consuming creation. Thalos must have been one such fragment given form and will. So that thing, whatever it was, wants to put the pieces back together?" "Yes," said Dumbledore quietly. "And if it succeeds, no magic, no life, will remain untouched. The first flame would unmake everything it once made." Silence filled the great hall, broken only by the howl of the wind beyond the walls. "Where should we hide it, then?" Hagrid asked at last. Dumbledore turned toward the staircase. "Not hide," he said, his tone measured, "but guard. There are places even within Hogwarts that few remember. Rooms built when the castle itself was young. One such lies beneath the Great Lake, sealed by the founders. It was meant for relics too dangerous to destroy." Without another word, he motioned for Hagrid to follow. Together they descended into the lower corridors, past suits of armor that turned their heads to watch them pass, past doorways, long unused. The air grew colder as they went, heavy with age and the weight of stone. They came at last to a stair spiraling downward into darkness. Dumbledore raised his wand and pale blue light filled the air. "Below this passage," he said, "lies the Vault of the Four." Hagrid followed close, careful not to slip on the slick steps. At the bottom stood a great door carved from black granite. Upon its surface gleamed 4 symbols: the serpent, the lion, the badger, and the raven, each encircled by a ring of ancient runes. Dumbledore laid his hand upon the door. "By the covenant of founders, by blood, by bone, by flame, by flight, open." The runes flared, and the door swung inward without a sound. Inside stretched a vast, circular chamber lit by floating orbs of cold light. Shelves lined the walls, filled with relics of forgotten ages, broken wands, tarnished armor, vials of shimmering dust. At the center rose a pedestal of marble, bare except for a single silver bowl, etched with wards. "Place it there," Dumbledore instructed. Hagrid stepped forward, unwrapping the cloth. The shard gleamed faintly, casting the long shadows. When he lowered it into the bowl, the light dimmed, then steadied, as though sensing the power of the wards around it. Dumbledore raised his wand again, drawing a circle of fire in the air. The flames folded inward, sealing the bowl beneath a transparent dome of light. "No living creature can touch it now," he said. "Not without the consent of all 4 houses." Hagrid exhaled, the weight of dread easing from his chest. "So that's it then? It's safe?" "For now," Dumbledore said. "But remember, Rubius, the storm outside is not what troubles me. It is the storm that waits beyond it." Hagrid frowned. "You mean that figure will come again?" "I mean," said Dumbledore, "that the servant was only a herald. Something older moves in the dark, something that remembers the first flame, not as legend, but as home." He turned to leave. "Come, you should rest." But as they reached the stair, a sound rose from behind them, faint at first, like a sigh through the stone, then sharper, a crack, a whisper, a pulse. The shard glowed brighter. Dumbledore froze. His eyes flashed to the bowl. "No," he murmured, "it reacts too soon." A thread of red light crawled across the dome's surface, splitting it like ice under pressure. The chamber trembled. "Professor!" Hagrid shouted, grabbing his wand. But before either could act, the light burst outward, filling the vault with searing brilliance. For an instant, Hagrid saw shapes forming in the air, wings, flames, a crown of stars. Then came a voice deep and distant, echoing from everywhere at once. "One flame fallen, one flame bound. The third awaits." The light vanished. The shard lay dim once more, the dome whole again, as though nothing had happened. Dumbledore's face was pale. "It has awakened another fragment," he whispered. "Somewhere in this world a second shard stirs." Hagrid stared at him, the echo of the voice still ringing in his ears. "Then this ain't over." "No," said Dumbledore softly. "It has only just begun." They left the vault in silence, sealing the door behind them. Above, the storm raged on, battering the castle walls, and somewhere, far beyond the reach of Hogwarts or the safety of its wards, a spark flared to life in the darkness, small, bright, and waiting for the call of its brothers. The first flame was awakening, and the world, though it did not yet know it, was standing at the edge of its rebirth. The storm lingered for 3 days and 3 nights, and when at last it broke, the world it left behind seemed sharpened and still. The snow lay deep upon the grounds of Hogwarts, smooth as silk, untouched even by the footprints of owls. From his hut near the forest's edge, Hagrid watched the pale light creep across the hills and tried to quiet the unease that had lodged deep in his chest since that night beneath the castle. He could not shake the sound of that voice, the deep, echoing whisper that had filled the vault. "One flame fallen, one flame bound. The third awaits." The words followed him into sleep, haunting his dreams with visions of fire spreading across mountains, of stars burning out one by one. Fang lay curled by the hearth, sleeping fitfully, and even the big dog seemed restless. Outside, the forest slept under snow, white and silent, yet Hagrid could feel something stirring beneath its roots. When the knock came at his door, it startled him. He turned quickly, setting down his mug of tea. "Come in," he called. The door opened, and a tall figure stepped inside, shaking the snow from his cloak. It was Firenze. His golden hair was tangled, and his eyes, normally bright as starlight, were shadowed with concern. "Hagrid," he said quietly, "we must speak." Hagrid motioned him to the fire. "What is it, lad?" "You've got that look again, same as before the war." Firenze hesitated before answering. "The stars are restless. Their patterns have shifted. I have read them for 100 years, and never have I seen them move as they do now." Hagrid frowned. What do they say? Ferenzi's gaze flicked toward the flames. They say that the fire has found its breath again. The first flame stirs and the heavens tremble at its waking. The words sent a chill through Hagrid. Then Dumbledore was right. There's another shard out there? Yes, said Ferenzi, and it has awakened in the far north, beyond the mountains where the giants once ruled. My kin have seen the signs. An aurora that burns red instead of green, and beasts of ice turning to ash in their dens. Hagrid rose, his great frame casting a long shadow across the hut. We can't let it rise, Ferenzi. Not after what we saw. Nor can we ignore it, said the Centaur. The flame feeds on fear and chaos. If the shard remains unguarded, it will call others to it. Wizards, creatures, those who crave power will seek its light. There was a heavy silence. Then Hagrid said, I'll talk to Dumbledore. He'll know what to do. Ferenzi shook his head. The stars warn of delay. If the flame takes shape before it is bound, no wizard spell will contain it. Hagrid stared into the fire. He thought of Megorian's sacrifice, of the burning forest, of the voice that had promised to return. He could not sit idle. Then I'll go, he said firmly. If the shard's in the north, I'll find it before anyone else does. Ferenzi inclined his head. The path will not be kind. Few who go beyond the mountains return, but if anyone can face the wild, it is you, keeper of beasts. I, said Hagrid, his eyes hard, I've faced worse than snow and shadows. That night, under a sky heavy with frost, Hagrid packed his things, thick furs, enchanted rope, a small supply of food, and his crossbow. He took the iron box from its hiding place and held it for a moment, feeling the faint warmth that still pulsed inside. You'll stay here, he muttered, locking it tight once more. One bit of trouble's enough. Before dawn, he set out, Fang at his heel. The forest watched him go, silent and solemn beneath its blanket of snow. He reached the castle before sunrise. Dumbledore was waiting in the courtyard, his cloak white as the snow around him. So you've heard, said the headmaster softly. Aye, Hagrid replied. Ferenzi came to me, says there's another shard in the north. I know, Dumbledore said. The owls brought word from the aurors stationed near the mountains. Strange lights in the sky, entire valley scorched, though no fire was set. It seems our fears are well founded. Then I'll go, said Hagrid. I can track it, same as any beast. If I find it first, we might have a chance to seal it like before. Dumbledore studied him, the wind lifting his silver beard. You understand. This will not be like the last time. Thalos was bound by the forest's wards. Out there in the wild, there will be no sanctuary, no allies but the land itself. I'll manage, said Hagrid simply. Dumbledore's eyes softened. I have no doubt. But remember, Rubius, courage is not only the strength to face danger, but to return when the fight is done. Hagrid gave a small nod. I'll come back, Professor, I promise. He turned to go, but Dumbledore called after him. Take this. He drew from his robes a small crystal vial filled with light that flickered like moonfire. Phoenix tears, he said, a gift from Fawkes. They may heal more than wounds. Hagrid tucked the vial carefully into his coat. Thank you, sir. By noon he had passed beyond the castle gates and begun the long journey north. The land grew rougher, the wind sharper, and the snow deeper with each mile. He crossed frozen rivers and climbed ridges where no path lay. Nights he spent beneath the open sky, his fire hidden in hollows of rock, his great form hunched against the cold. Sometimes when he woke, he thought he heard whispers in the wind, voices calling his name in tones not quite human. Once, in the distance, he saw a red light flicker across the horizon, faint as the heartbeat of the world. At last, after many days, he reached the foothills of the northern mountains. The land there was desolate, a wasteland of stone and ice. Yet among the peaks he saw movement, a dark shape gliding against the storm clouds, wings vast and gleaming with frost. "A dragon," he murmured, awe and dread mingled in his voice. But no dragon he knew burned with such color. The creature's scales shimmered like molten metal, and its breath left trails of crimson light across the snow. Fang barked, but Hagrid laid a calming hand on him. "Steady, lad. That beast's no ordinary one. It's touched by the shard." As the dragon wheeled overhead, a second light answered it from the valley below. A pulsing glow, deep and red, shining through the ice. The shard had awakened, and it had already chosen its guardian. Hagrid tightened his grip on his crossbow, the wind whipping his cloak around him. "Looks like we found our trouble," he said grimly, and with Fang close behind, he began his climb into the mountains toward the heart of the storm and the second fire that waited there. Hungry and unbound, snow whipped around Hagrid in blinding sheets as he climbed higher into the mountains. Each gust struck him like a hammer, numbing his face and hands despite the thick furs he wore. The sky was a swirl of gray and red, light bleeding through the clouds from some hidden fire deep ahead. Fang trudged beside him, his breath steaming in the cold. Even the dog's usual courage seemed to waver in the haunted silence of that frozen land. The mountains stretched endlessly, jagged teeth of ice and stone. Once giants had lived here, and their old dwellings still marked the cliffs. Caves larger than houses, bones turned to stone, and crude carvings half buried in frost. But there were newer marks as well, scorched patches where the snow had melted into black glass, and claw tracks that glowed faintly red in the dark. They had been following those marks for hours. Hagrid paused at a ridge and looked down into a narrow valley. There, through the whirling snow, a faint red light pulsed from within a ring of standing stones, the same hue he had seen in the forest months ago, alive and rhythmic, as though the earth itself breathed fire. "That's it, Fang," he murmured. "That's the shard." But something moved within that circle, a shadow gliding across the snow, vast and sinuous. The dragon, its wings folded against its back as it prowled around the stones, tail lashing. Each breath from its nostrils melted the snow in a hiss of steam. Hagrid crouched behind a boulder, heart pounding. He had seen dragons before, bred them, fed them, even calmed a few. But this creature was wrong. Its scales shimmered with red fire one moment and black smoke the next, as if it shifted between solid and flame. Its eyes were like molten gold, burning without mercy. When it roared, the air itself trembled. The sound carried far, and Hagrid heard an echo not from the beast, but from deep beneath the ground, a pulse answering the roar, matching its rhythm. The shard and the dragon were bound. "We've got to stop it," he whispered, "before it breaks free proper." He waited until the creature circled the far side of the stones, then began to move. Slow, careful steps through the drifts, his boots sinking without a sound. He reached the nearest stone, its surface carved with runes so ancient they looked more like cracks than words. The air around it shimmered with heat despite the storm. He drew his wand and murmured, "Revelio." For a heartbeat, the hidden runes glowed bright. He saw the pattern, an old binding sigil, weakened but not yet broken. If he could repair it, perhaps he could trap both the dragon and the shard before the two became one. But the dragon's head snapped up. Hagrid froze as those burning eyes turned toward him. The creature sniffed the air, smoke curling from its nostrils. Then it struck. With a single beat of its wings, it surged forward, snow exploding beneath it. Hagrid dove aside as a blast of fire scorched the stones where he'd stood. Fang barked furiously, darting between rocks as the heat swept over them. "Run, Fang, go!" Hagrid shouted, rolling behind a ridge. He felt the ground quake as the dragon landed, its claws gouging deep furrows in the earth. The shard's glow pulsed brighter, faster. The runes on the stones flickered and went dark, their power collapsing under the weight of the beast's fury. The valley filled with red light. "Blast it," Hagrid muttered, raising his wand. "Aguamenti!" A torrent of water burst forth, striking the dragon's chest. Steam roared upward, hissing as the flames dimmed. But only for a moment. The dragon bellowed, shaking its head, then swept its tail across the snow. The blow caught Hagrid square in the side, flinging him through the air. He hit the ground hard, rolling until the world spun. Pain flared across his ribs. He forced himself to rise. "Not yet," he growled through gritted teeth. "Not while I've breath left." He reached for the small vial around his neck. The gift from Dumbledore, the tears of the Phoenix. The vial glowed faintly, warm even through the storm. He uncorked it and whispered a word he barely remembered. The liquid turned to mist, swirling around his hand. When he thrust it forward, the mist shot outward like silver flame. It struck the dragon's eyes. The creature roared in pain, staggering back. Its fire dimmed, its movements faltered. Now. Hagrid raised his wand high, shouting the binding charm Firenze had once taught him. The runes carved into the stones flared back to life, blazing white against the red glow of the shard. Lines of light shot between them, weaving a cage around the dragon. But something else answered, another voice deep and cruel, whispering from the shard itself. "Foolish keeper," it hissed, "you would bind what must be reborn." Hagrid felt the ground split beneath his boots. The fire in the center of the stones flared upward, forming a column that twisted like a living serpent. Inside it he saw faces, human and inhuman, ancient and burning. "Not again," he gasped. "You're not taking this world again." He poured his will into the spell, forcing the runes to hold. The cage of light tightened, dragging the dragon inward toward the flaming column. The beast fought, roaring, its wings beating furiously, its claws tearing at the light. Then with a final desperate roar, it lunged into the fire and vanished. The column folded in on itself, shrinking, dimming, until only a small sphere of red light remained, pulsing faintly in the snow. Hagrid fell to his knees, panting. The air was still. The storm had stopped. Only silence remained, heavy and strange. Fang crept to his side, whimpering. Hagrid laid a shaking hand on the dog's head. "It's done," he whispered. "It's sealed again." But even as he said it, the sphere flickered, and a single ember drifted up from its surface, glowing brighter than the rest. It hung in the air before him, trembling like a living thing. Then it split in two. Hagrid watched, frozen, as the second ember shot skyward, disappearing into the clouds. The first remained, pulsing weakly as though mocking him. He realized the truth then. He had not destroyed the shard, only divided it. The flame had scattered again, and now another piece was free. Hagrid bowed his head, exhaustion and despair washing over him. The cold bit deep, but he barely felt it. "Dumbledore will know what to do," he murmured at last. "He has to." He gathered the faintly glowing sphere, wrapping it in cloth. Then, leaning heavily on his staff, he began the long trek back down the mountain, each step slower than the last. The wind rose once more, carrying with it a low, distant sound, a heartbeat echoing faintly through the peaks. Far away beyond sight, another light flared to life on the horizon, gold this time, not red, and somewhere deep within the earth the voice of the first flame whispered, "Two burn, the third shall rise." Hagrid did not hear it, but he felt the chill of its promise in his bones, and though the mountains lay behind him, the shadow of their fire followed all the way home. The long road home was a blur of cold and darkness. Hagrid trudged through snow and shadow, the mountains fading behind him like ghosts. Days passed without sunrise, only the dim glow of storm-lit skies above. The shard he carried, now a sphere of faint red light, throbbed in his pack with a slow, rhythmic pulse, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. Each beat made the hair on his arms prickle. Fang walked close to his heel, silent and uneasy. Even he seemed to sense the thing's power. By the time the spires of Hogwarts came into view again, Hagrid was limping and half frozen. The snow had turned to rain, washing the last of the blood and soot from his coat. Yet no amount of rain could cleanse the dread he carried with him. The shard was quieter now, dimmer, but he could still feel it moving, restless as a caged beast. He did not wait for dawn. Lantern in hand, he crossed the silent grounds, climbed the castle steps, and made his way straight to the headmaster's office. The stone gargoyle guarding the entrance sprang aside at the sound of Dumbledore's name, as though the castle itself understood the urgency of his return. Dumbledore was waiting at his desk, as if he had known the exact hour Hagrid would come. The old wizard's eyes gleamed like blue fire in the lamplight. "You have been gone long, my friend," he said quietly. Hagrid set the cloth bundle down on the desk. "Found it," he said hoarsely. "But it ain't gone quiet. I sealed it best I could. The dragon that guarded it gone now. But, the shard split. One piece is here. Another flew off." Dumbledore's face tightened. "And you saw where it went?" Hagrid shook his head. "Vanished into the clouds. But it was gold, Professor, not red. Gold." Dumbledore rose slowly, his robes whispering over the floor. He reached out and lifted the edge of the cloth. The faint red sphere shimmered beneath it, pulsing like the last ember of a dying fire. He gazed at it in silence for a long moment. "Two flames awakened," he murmured at last. "Red for destruction, gold for dominion." He turned to Hagrid. "What you brought back is not merely a fragment of the first flame. It is one half of its heart. The other will seek to unite with it, and when they meet, they will call the third." "The third?" Hagrid asked, his voice rough. "Yes." Dumbledore's tone was grave, his eyes distant, as though he saw something far beyond the room. "The final fragment, the light that binds or breaks all things. If these three are joined, there will be no force, wizard or otherwise, that can stand against the fire that follows." The two men stood in silence, the soft hum of the shard filling the space between them. Finally, Dumbledore spoke again. "The red flame is sealed for now. The gold one has risen. We must find it before the third awakens." "I'll go," said Hagrid immediately. The headmaster shook his head. "No, Rubius, you have done more than enough. Rest now. The centaurs are watching the forest again, and the ministry will send its seekers north. The gold shard may appear far from these lands." Hagrid frowned. "Can't just sit here while the world burns?" Dumbledore's expression softened. "You have faced the flame twice and lived. That alone is miracle enough. Rest your strength, my friend. There may come a day when I call upon you again, and when I do, I will need the same courage you've shown already." Reluctantly, Hagrid nodded. He watched as Dumbledore lifted the shard and placed it within a crystal sphere etched with runes. The hum dimmed, sealed behind layers of ancient spellwork. But even through the glass, the faint red light glowed, waiting. Days passed, and Hogwarts returned to its quiet rhythm. Students laughed again in the courtyards, unaware of the danger lurking in the far corners of the world. The forest, though scarred by the fires of Thalos, was alive once more. Creatures crept from hiding, and snowdrops bloomed along the edges of the blackened glades. Yet peace at Hogwarts had always been fragile. Late one evening, as Hagrid sat mending a broken fence post outside his hut, the sky flickered gold. At first he thought it the sunset, but the light grew brighter, spreading across the clouds in streaks that moved against the wind. Then came a low rumble, not thunder, but something deeper, as if the world itself were drawing breath. Fang whimpered. "Not again," Hagrid muttered, rising to his feet. He stared toward the north, where the mountains hid behind a wall of mist. A golden beam pierced the clouds, rising straight into the heavens. For a heartbeat, it lit the towers of the castle in blazing light, turning every window to molten glass. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished. A moment later, the bell in the astronomy tower tolled once, though no one had touched it. The sound rolled through the night, deep and sorrowful. Hagrid grabbed his coat and hurried up to the castle. By the time he reached Dumbledore's office, the headmaster was already standing at the window, wand in hand, eyes fixed on the fading glow. "You saw it too," Dumbledore said without turning. "Aye," Hagrid said. "The gold one, I reckon. The second flame has awakened fully." Dumbledore's voice was quiet but hard. "And it does not burn alone. There's a presence behind it, a mind. Someone has claimed it." Hagrid's heart sank. "A wizard?" Dumbledore nodded. "One powerful enough to hear the whisper of the old magic and arrogant enough to answer it." He turned then, his eyes reflecting the last gleam of the vanished light. "The world shifts, Rubius. We stand again at the edge of an age. The flames that forged magic are stirring, and those who crave dominion will seek to wield them." "What do we do, Professor?" Dumbledore was silent for a long time, then said, "We wait and we watch. The first flame burns across all realms. When the gold shard reveals its bearer, the red will stir in answer. When that happens, you must go back to the forest. The wards will not hold without you." Hagrid nodded grimly. "Aye, I'll be ready." Outside, the snow had stopped falling. The clouds broke apart, revealing a sky sharp with stars. But one among them glowed brighter than the rest, a new star, faintly gold, pulsing like a heartbeat in the heavens. Hagrid stared at it, unease gnawing at his chest. What if the third one wakes before we find the gold? Dumbledore did not answer at first. When he finally spoke, his words were little more than a whisper. "Then the fire will come for us all." That night, as Hagrid returned to his hut, he paused at the edge of the forest. The trees were still, their branches glittering with frost. But deep within he could hear the faint rustle of life, the centaurs, the unicorns, the old spirits of the wood all stirring in unease. He knelt, pressing his palm to the frozen ground. It was cold, yet beneath it he felt something, an echo of warmth, faint but steady, the sealed flame. "Sleep now," he murmured. "Sleep as long as you can." But in the wind that swept through the branches came a whisper, low and knowing. 3 flames, 1 fire. The world remembers. Hagrid rose slowly, his breath clouding in the air. He looked once more toward the golden star in the sky and then back toward the dark line of the forest. "The forest endures," he said quietly, repeating Magorian's words, "and so will I." The wind carried his vow away into the night, and far to the north, beyond mountain and sea, a man cloaked in gold flame opened his eyes and smiled, the shard burning bright in his hand. The golden light had not been a dream. In the days that followed, its afterglow haunted the sky, soft by daylight, fierce by dusk. It shimmered, sometimes on the lake, reflected in the waters, like a restless flame waiting to be reborn. The castle whispered with unease, portraits muttered among themselves, and the ghosts moved more swiftly through the corridors, as though drawn by unseen tides. To most, it was nothing more than strange weather. But Hagrid knew better. He had seen what followed in the wake of the red fire and understood what waited now. Something had awakened again, something proud, patient, and far-reaching. The students, bright and unknowing, went about their lessons. Snowdrops melted from the eaves. The forbidden forest creaked and groaned in the thaw. But beneath that illusion of peace, the earth still remembered fire. Hagrid kept watch. Each dawn before the castle stirred, he walked the forest edge, checking the ward stones Dumbledore had strengthened after the second shard's arrival. Each stone was etched with runes that shimmered faintly beneath his touch, humming with protective magic. Yet even they trembled now and then, as if something beyond was testing their strength. "Hold steady," he would murmur, running his great hand over the carvings. "You've done it before. You'll do it again." At night he sat by his hearth, staring into the iron box on the shelf. The red shard, dim though it had become, pulsed faintly within. He could feel it when the golden light stirred, one flame answering another far across the world. He wished he could forget the words he had overheard in the vault. "Two burn, the third shall rise." They echoed even now in the hollow of his chest. Then one morning the owls came. They arrived in flocks, wings darkening the gray sky, their calls sharp and urgent. Scrolls dropped across the grounds like snow. Professors hurried from their classes. Even the portraits seemed to lean forward to listen. The news spread before noon. Whole villages in the north had vanished in light. Fields had turned to glass. Rivers boiled into steam. The aurors sent to investigate returned blind from the brightness. Hagrid stood outside his hut reading one of the messages, his brow furrowed. Firenze appeared at the tree line, his mane dusted with frost. "It moves south," the centaur said. "The golden flame has taken form, a man crowned in fire, riding storms. He gathers followers among men and beasts alike. They name him Solinar, the Herald of the Dawn." "Herald?" Hagrid grunted. "He's no herald, he's trouble." Firenze's gaze was grim. He believes the first flame will end the age of wizards and birth a world remade by light. To him, Thalos and the others were impurities, ash to be burned away. Hagrid folded the parchment roughly. "Then he means to bring the 3 together." "Yes." And if he succeeds, the world will not burn, it will dissolve. Light without shadow devours all. For a moment, neither spoke. The wind whispered through the black trees. Finally, Hagrid said, "Then we stop him." "You cannot do this alone." "I'm not alone," Hagrid said, meeting Firenze's eyes. "I've got the forest and Dumbledore and, blast it all, the whole school if I have to." Firenze bowed his head slightly. "Then may the stars lend you their strength." That night, Dumbledore summoned Hagrid to the Great Hall. The tables were gone, replaced by maps and scrolls spread across the stone floor. Minerva McGonagall stood beside him, stern and pale. Kingsley Shacklebolt's Patronus shimmered faintly in the air above them. "Hagrid," Dumbledore said, his tone quiet but urgent, "the golden flame has crossed into Britain. Reports place it near the ruins of Tintagel. The old wards there have collapsed. It is calling the remnants of the first flame, the third fragment." Hagrid felt his throat tighten. "Then the last ones waken." "Yes," Dumbledore said. "And if it rises, Solinar will unite the three. There will be no stopping him then." McGonagall looked up sharply. "You cannot be thinking of going yourself, Albus." "I must," he said. "The bonds that sealed the vaults were cast by the Founder's magic. I am the last living link to that power." "Then I'm coming with you," said Hagrid. Dumbledore smiled faintly. "I thought you might say that." They traveled under cover of storm, through moor and stone, until the sea came into view, a wild black expanse beneath a bruised sky. Tintagel's cliffs rose before them, sharp as broken teeth. The ruins glimmered with faint gold light, pulsing through cracks in the earth. At the heart of the cliffs, in a hollow where once a fortress stood the man Firenze had named, Solinar. He was tall, his hair a mane of molten light, his eyes burning like the sun at noon. Around him stood men and women cloaked in flame, their faces serene as statues. Above them the air rippled with heat, and in its midst floated a sphere of pure white fire, the third shard. "So you come," Solinar said, his voice ringing clear through the storm. "The keeper of beasts and the keeper of wisdom. Do you bring your surrender or your faith?" Dumbledore stepped forward. "Neither," he said calmly. "Only the truth. The fire you seek to join will not give life. It will unmake all that lives." Solinar smiled. "Unmake? No? Renew? The world has grown weary of shadows. Magic has grown old. I will return it to its source." "By destroying it?" Hagrid roared. "You'll kill every living thing." Solinar's eyes flared, only to make them pure again. He raised his hand, and the three shards answered. The red within its vault, the gold in his chest, the white above the sea. Light lanced across the sky, linking them. The air shuddered. Dumbledore drew his wand, his voice a command of thunder. "Finite Arcanum Primordia!" A wall of blue flame erupted, clashing with Solinar's gold. The storm exploded into chaos, winds screaming, the sea boiling beneath. Hagrid lifted his crossbow, firing enchanted bolts that struck the followers and scattered them like ash. But Solinar only laughed, his body blazing brighter. "You cannot stop what was begun before your kind learned words." "Maybe not," Hagrid shouted, "but I'll slow it down." He ran forward, the ground shaking under his boots. Fang barked wildly at his side. The white shard pulsed, the sea rising beneath it. Hagrid leapt, swinging a chain of dragon steel Dumbledore had forged for him. It wrapped around the glowing sphere, pulling it down. "Now, Professor!" he roared. Dumbledore thrust his wand forward. The red shard, sealed far away beneath Hogwarts, answered its twin's call. A column of crimson fire erupted from the horizon, meeting the gold and white in the heart of the storm. The three collided, light devouring light. For an instant there was no sound, no world, only brilliance. When the blaze faded, Hagrid lay upon the stones. The storm was gone. Solinar was nowhere to be seen. Only the sea remained, calm and endless, its surface glowing faintly, as though the sky itself had fallen into it. Dumbledore stood over him, weary but unbroken. In his hand he held a single darkened crystal, its light extinguished. "It is done," he said softly. Hagrid struggled to his feet. "Gone for good?" Dumbledore looked toward the sea. "No, the first flame cannot die, but it sleeps now, scattered once more across the world. And perhaps, this time, it will dream a little longer." They turned back toward the cliffs, the wind cold but clean against their faces. Behind them the waves rolled gently, each crest catching the faintest glimmer of red, gold, and white. Three colors entwined, fading into dawn. And far across the horizon, in the quiet heart of the forest, a whisper passed through the roots of every tree, through the breath of every beast. The forest endures, the fire remembers, and so it ended as all great fires do, not with silence, but with the promise of light yet to come.